What happens when one of comedy's biggest stars walks onto a morning show expecting the usual laugh fest, but instead gets confronted with questions that cut way too close to home? Today we're breaking down the moment Kevin Hart completely lost it on live television. And trust me, this is not what anyone saw coming. Before we get into it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think really set him off. Because this whole thing is wild. So picture this, Kevin Hart is booked for what should be a routine appearance on Today with Jenna and Friends. The show's been gaining traction for its relaxed vibe, where celebrities come on, joke around, plug their latest projects, and everyone goes home happy. But from the second Kevin walks onto that set, something feels different. The energy is off. Jenna opens with her signature warm smile, welcoming Kevin to the show, and he responds with his usual high-energy entrance. He's animated, he's cracking jokes before he even sits down, doing that thing he does where he makes himself the center of attention immediately. The audience is already laughing, and for a moment it seems like this is going to go exactly how these things always go. But then Jenna says something that shifts the entire mood. She mentions his latest project, a comedy special that just dropped. And instead of the softball questions about the creative process or favorite moments, she pivots hard. She brings up something Kevin said in an interview from years ago, a comment about growth and accountability that he made during a previous controversy. And she asks him point blank if he actually meant what he said or if it was just damage control. You can see Kevin's face change instantly. The smile doesn't completely disappear, but it freezes. It becomes this forced thing, this mask he's holding onto while his eyes are calculating what just happened. He laughs, but it's not his real laugh. It's that uncomfortable laugh people do when they're buying time to figure out their next move. He tries to brush it off with a joke, something about how everyone's a detective now, how people love digging through old interviews like they're investigating a crime scene. Jenna doesn't let it go, and this is where you can tell she came prepared, because she follows up immediately. She mentions specific things he said, specific promises about doing better, about listening, about evolving. And then she asks him what he's actually done since then. Not in an aggressive way, but in this calm, persistent way that's almost worse because he can't accuse her of attacking him. Kevin shifts in his seat. He's still trying to keep it light, still trying to steer this back to comfortable territory. He talks about his comedy, about how his job is to make people laugh, about how he's always learning and growing. But Jenna cuts through that too. She says that's great, but that's not what she asked. She asked what specific actions he's taken, what concrete steps he's made to back up those words from years ago. The co-hosts are noticeably quiet now. Usually on these shows, everyone's chiming in, adding jokes, keeping the energy up. But now they're just watching this unfold, and you can feel the tension through the screen. One of them tries to interject with something lighter, tries to pivot to a different topic, but Jenna actually stops them. She says she wants to finish this thought, and she looks right back at Kevin, waiting for an answer. Kevin's not laughing anymore. He sits back, crosses his arms, and there's this long pause where you can see him deciding how to handle this. He starts talking about his platform, about the millions of people he reaches, about the positive messages in his content. He's getting defensive now. His voice is rising a little, and he's using that technique where he talks fast and fills the space so the other person can't get a word in. But Jenna's ready for that too. She waits for him to finish, lets the silence sit for a second, and then she says something that really gets under his skin. She tells him that she's been a fan for years, that she's watched his career, and that's exactly why she's asking these questions. Because she knows he's capable of more than surface-level responses, and she thinks his audience deserves more than deflection. Kevin's jaw tightens. He uncrosses his arms and leans forward, and now he's not even pretending to smile anymore. He asks her what she wants from him, what exactly she expects him to say. Is she looking for some kind of public confession? Some dramatic moment where he breaks down and admits he's a work in progress. He tells her that he's human, that he makes mistakes, and that he's tired of people acting like celebrities owe them a play-by-play of their personal development. Jenna responds by saying that nobody's asking for a play-by-play. But when you build your brand on authenticity and growth, people are going to hold you to that. When you profit off being relatable and real, you don't get to hide behind the celebrity excuse when it's inconvenient. She's not yelling, she's not being dramatic, but her words are hitting hard, and everyone watching knows it. The audience is dead silent now. This is not what they came for. They came for Kevin Hart being funny, for lighthearted banter, for entertainment. Instead, they're watching what feels like a therapy session gone wrong. Except it's happening on national television and nobody knows how to stop it. Kevin stands up, not to leave, not yet, but to pace. He's one of those people who can't sit still when they're worked up, and right now, he is worked up. He starts talking about the pressure of fame, about how everyone wants a piece of him. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone thinks they know him based on interviews and social media. He talks about how exhausting it is to constantly be under a microscope, to have every word analyzed, every action questioned, and then he turns it around on Jenna. He asks her if she's ever made mistakes, if she's ever said something she regrets, if she's ever had to figure things out as she goes. He asks her why she gets to sit there and judge him when she's not the one living his life. Dealing with his pressures, navigating his world, it's a deflection, sure, but it's also genuine frustration coming out, and you can hear it in his voice. Jenna doesn't take the bait. She acknowledges that yes, she's made mistakes. Everyone has. But she's not the one who went on a press tour talking about accountability and then seemingly forgot about it. She tells him that holding someone accountable isn't the same as judging them, and if he can't tell the difference, that's part of the problem. Kevin stops pacing. He looks at her, then at the co-hosts, then at the cameras, and you can see him realizing that this isn't going to end well no matter what he does. If he keeps arguing, he looks defensive and proves her point. If he backs down, he looks weak, and that's not his brand. He's trapped, and the worst part is it's all happening live with no commercial break to regroup. He sits back down, but his whole body language has changed. He's not leaning in anymore. He's pulled back, arms crossed again, and his expression is somewhere between angry and exhausted. Jenna tries to move on, asks about his upcoming projects, but Kevin gives the shortest answers possible. Yes, no, maybe. He's checked out emotionally, just going through the motions now. One of the co-hosts, trying to salvage what's left of the interview, jumps in with a question about Kevin's family. It's an obvious attempt to lighten the mood, to get him talking about something personal and positive. But Kevin sees right through it, and instead of playing along, he calls it out. He says he knows what they're doing, trying to smooth things over, trying to get the show back on track like nothing happened. He tells them he's not interested in pretending everything's fine when it clearly isn't. Jenna takes a deep breath, and you can tell she's deciding whether to push forward or let it go. She chooses to push. She tells Kevin that this reaction, right here, is exactly what people are talking about. When things get uncomfortable, when he's challenged, he shuts down or lashes out instead of engaging. She asks him if he sees the pattern, if he recognizes that this is part of what people have been trying to tell him. Kevin's voice gets louder. He asks her who appointed her the authority on his behavior, who made her the expert on Kevin Hart. He reminds her that she doesn't know him, that this is a morning talk show, not a therapy session, and she's way out of line. He tells her that if she wanted to ambush him, she should have been honest about it instead of inviting him on under false pretenses. Jenna fires back that there was no ambush, that these are fair questions that any journalist should be asking. And if he considers basic accountability an ambush, that says more about him than it does about her. She reminds him that he's been on dozens of shows where they lobbed him softballs and let him control the narrative. So maybe it's time someone asked him real questions. The other co-hosts are exchanging glances now, clearly uncomfortable. One of them tries to suggest they take a break, but Kevin immediately says no. He says if they're going to do this, they're going to do it now, on camera, because he's not going to give them the satisfaction of editing this into whatever narrative they want. He wants people to see exactly what's happening, how he's being treated, how this whole thing was set up to make him look bad. Jenna laughs, but it's not a friendly laugh. She tells him that nobody set him up, that he's making himself look bad by refusing to have an honest conversation. She says the only thing people are going to see is a man who can't handle being questioned, who built a career on calling other people out but can't take it when the tables are turned. Kevin points at her, his finger literally pointing across the table, and he tells her she doesn't know anything about his career, about what he's built, about what he's overcome. He starts listing his accomplishments, the tours, the movies, the specials, the business ventures. He's raising his voice now, talking over her when she tries to respond, and it's becoming less of an interview and more of a fight. Jenna stays calm, which somehow makes it worse for Kevin. She tells him that she's not questioning his success, she's questioning his character, and those are two completely different things. She says plenty of successful people are terrible human beings. So using his career achievements as a defense doesn't actually address anything she's asking about. That's when Kevin really loses it. He stands up again, but this time he starts unhooking his microphone. He's fumbling with it, his hands shaking slightly from anger or adrenaline or both, and he's muttering under his breath. The co-hosts are trying to calm him down, telling him to sit back down. Let's just talk this through, but he's not hearing any of it. Jenna asks him if he's really going to walk out, if that's his response to being challenged. She tells him that running away isn't a good look, that it's only going to make things worse. Kevin stops unhooking his mic for a second and looks directly at her. He tells her that what's making things worse is people like her who think they're helping by putting people on blast on television. He says she's not brave for asking tough questions, she's just cruel, and she's using him to make a name for herself. Jenna's face hardens. She tells him that's a coward's response. To accuse someone of having ulterior motives instead of just answering the question. She says she's been doing this job for years and didn't need him to make a name for herself. But apparently he needs to tear her down to avoid looking in the mirror. Kevin finally gets his microphone off and drops it on the chair. He tells the whole table that this is exactly what's wrong with media today, how everyone thinks they're entitled to dig into people's lives, to demand explanations and apologies, to act like judge and jury. He says he came here to promote his work and have a good time, not to be interrogated like a criminal. One of the co-hosts, trying one last time to de-escalate, tells Kevin that nobody thinks he's a criminal, that these are just conversations people are having in the culture right now. And as a public figure, he's part of that conversation whether he likes it or not. Kevin turns to them and asks if they knew this was going to happen, if they were in on it, if this whole thing was planned. The co-host looks genuinely surprised and says no, that they had no idea Jenna was going to go this direction. Jenna interrupts and says that's because she doesn't script her interviews. She responds to what's in front of her, and what was in front of her was someone being evasive and defensive. She tells Kevin that if he'd just answered the questions honestly from the start, this could have been a meaningful conversation, instead of whatever this has turned into. Kevin shakes his head and laughs bitterly. He says there's no winning with people like her, that no matter what he said, she would have twisted it into something negative. He tells her that she came in with an agenda, and he's not going to play along. He starts walking toward the edge of the set, away from the interview area, and the cameras are following him. Jenna calls after him, asking if this is really how he wants this to end, with him running away on live television. She tells him that thousands of people are watching right now, and this is the image he's choosing to leave them with. Kevin stops walking, but doesn't turn around. He stands there for a moment, his back to the cameras, and you can see his shoulders rise and fall with a deep breath. Then he turns around, and his face is different now. The anger is still there, but there's something else too, something that looks almost like hurt. He tells Jenna that she has no idea what it's like to be him, to have millions of people watching your every move, waiting for you to mess up so they can tear you apart. He says he's spent his whole life working to get where he is, and people like her act like that means nothing because he's not perfect. Jenna's expression softens slightly, but her voice stays firm. She tells him that nobody expects perfection, but they do expect growth, especially from someone who talks about it constantly. She says the problem isn't that he's made mistakes. It's that he doesn't seem to think he needs to answer for them, and that's not how accountability works. Kevin asks her what she wants him to say, what magic words will make her happy. Should he apologize right now, on camera, for every mistake he's ever made? Should he list them all out one by one? He tells her that's not realistic, and it's not fair to demand that from someone in the middle of a talk show that was supposed to be light. Jenna responds that maybe that's the problem, that we've normalized these lighthearted interviews where nothing real is ever discussed, where celebrities get to control the narrative completely and never have to face any real scrutiny. She says maybe it's time to change that, and if Kevin doesn't like being one of the first people to experience that change, that's unfortunate, but it doesn't make it wrong. Kevin looks at the cameras, then back at Jenna, then at the silent audience who's been watching this entire meltdown unfold. He seems to be weighing his options, trying to decide if there's any way to salvage this or if he's already too far gone. The silence stretches out, uncomfortable and heavy, and nobody on that set knows what's going to happen next. Kevin finally breaks the silence, but his voice is different now. It's lower, more controlled, like he's pulling himself together and choosing his words carefully. He tells Jenna that she's right about one thing, that these conversations need to happen, but ambushing someone on live television isn't the way to do it. He says there's a difference between holding someone accountable and humiliating them for ratings, and what she's doing feels a lot more like the latter. Jenna sits up straighter, and you can see that comment hit a nerve. She tells him that ratings are the last thing on her mind, that if she cared about ratings, she would have kept this fluffy and easy like every other celebrity interview. She says she's doing this because she actually respects him enough to expect more from him. And if he can't see the difference between accountability and humiliation, that's his issue to work through. Kevin walks back toward the interview area but doesn't sit down. He stands there, hovering between staying and leaving, and starts talking about the impossible standards celebrities are held to. He says everyone wants them to be perfect role models while simultaneously tearing them down the second they show any humanity. He talks about how exhausting it is to constantly perform, to always have the right answer, to never be allowed to just be a flawed person trying to figure things out. One of the co-hosts tries to validate his feelings, saying that it must be incredibly difficult, and that they understand the pressure he's under. But Jenna cuts in before Kevin can respond. She tells him that privilege comes with responsibility, and having a massive platform means accepting that people are going to ask questions about how you use it. She says plenty of people deal with pressure without lashing out when they're questioned, so that's not really an excuse. Kevin's face flushes. He tells her she keeps twisting everything he says, that she's not even listening to him. She's just waiting for her turn to deliver another lecture. He says this isn't a conversation, it's a prosecution, and she's already decided he's guilty before he even opened his mouth. He asks her point blank if there's anything he could say right now that would satisfy her, or if she's already made up her mind about who he is. Jenna pauses, and for the first time she looks like she's actually considering his question instead of having a response locked and loaded. She tells him honestly that she doesn't know, that it would depend on what he says and whether it seems genuine. She says she's not trying to trap him. She's trying to get him to engage authentically instead of hiding behind deflection and defensiveness. Kevin laughs, but there's no humor in it. He tells her that's easy to say when she's not the one being grilled, when she's not the one whose reputation is on the line. He says authenticity is a luxury when you're sitting in the interviewer's chair, but when you're the one under the microscope, every word can be used against you, taken out of context, turned into headlines that follow you forever. Jenna acknowledges that's fair, that there is a power dynamic in interviews, but she reminds him that he chose to be famous. He chose to build his brand on being outspoken and real, and he doesn't get to retreat behind corporate speak when the realness gets uncomfortable. She says if he wants people to stop asking these questions, maybe he should stop making promises about growth that he doesn't seem interested in keeping. Kevin's hands clench into fists at his sides. He tells her she's making a lot of assumptions about him based on one interview, that she doesn't know what he does in his private life, what conversations he has, what work he puts in. He says not everything needs to be public. And just because he doesn't perform his growth for her satisfaction doesn't mean it's not happening. Jenna asks him why it's so hard for him to just say that then, why every answer has to come with defensiveness and accusations. She tells him that if he'd started with what he just said, instead of deflecting and getting angry, they could have had a productive conversation. She says his reaction is exactly why people question his sincerity, because the minute he's pushed even slightly, he falls apart. Kevin takes a step toward the interview area, and for a second it looks like he might actually sit back down and try to reset. But then he stops, shakes his head, and tells Jenna that he's done. He says he's not going to stand there and let her psychoanalyze him on television, that this isn't what he signed up for, and he doesn't owe her or anyone watching an explanation for how he chooses to live his life. Jenna's voice gets sharper. She tells him that by walking out, he's proving every point she's made, that he can't handle real conversation, that he expects everyone to treat him with kid gloves, that growth for him is just a talking point and not something he's actually committed to. She says this is his chance to prove her wrong, and instead he's running away like a child who didn't get his way. Kevin stops in his tracks. He turns around slowly, and his face is flushed with anger. He tells her that calling him a child is rich, coming from someone who thinks ambushing people makes her a serious journalist. He says she's not some hard-hitting reporter exposing the truth. She's just someone who gets off on making people uncomfortable and then acting superior when they react. The co-hosts are completely frozen now. One of them has their hand over their mouth, another is staring at the floor, and you can tell they want to disappear. This has gone so far beyond a normal interview that there's no roadmap for how to handle it. The producers are probably losing their minds, but the cameras are still rolling and nobody's cutting to commercial. Jenna stands up now, matching Kevin's energy. She tells him that if asking direct questions is an ambush in his world, that explains a lot. She says she's not trying to make him uncomfortable for sport. She's trying to have a real conversation, and if he's too fragile to handle that, maybe he shouldn't be doing interviews at all. She tells him that millions of people face criticism every day without melting down. So why should he get a pass just because he's famous? Kevin points at her again, his voice rising. He tells her not to talk to him about fragility when she's sitting there safe behind her desk acting like she's never made a mistake in her life. He says it's easy to be brave when you're the one asking the questions instead of answering them. And maybe she should spend some time in the hot seat before she judges how other people handle it. Jenna doesn't back down. She tells him she'd be happy to answer tough questions, that she's not afraid of accountability. And the difference between them is she wouldn't have a meltdown and storm offset if someone challenged her. She says his ego is so massive that he can't even conceive of someone asking him legitimate questions without it being a personal attack. Kevin's voice drops to almost a whisper, which somehow feels more intense than when he was yelling. He tells her that this is why people hate the media, why celebrities are scared to be honest, because people like her weaponize vulnerability and call it journalism. He says she can sit there and feel good about herself for taking him down, but all she's really done is prove that honesty gets you punished. So why would anyone bother? Jenna's expression shifts slightly, and you can see that comment landed differently than the others. She tells him that's not fair, that she's not punishing honesty, she's pushing back against dishonesty. She says if he'd been honest from the beginning, instead of defensive and evasive, this would have gone completely differently. She tells him he's rewriting what happened to make himself the victim. Kevin shakes his head and starts walking toward the exit again. This time he doesn't stop when Jenna calls after him. She's telling him that walking away doesn't make him right, that people are going to see this for what it is, but he's not listening anymore. He's done engaging, done defending himself, done with the whole situation. The co-hosts finally snap into action, trying to figure out how to end the segment. One of them attempts to address the camera, to smooth over what just happened, but they're clearly flustered and don't really know what to say. The other is half standing, like they're considering going after Kevin, but not sure if that would make things better or worse. Jenna sits back down, and her face is hard to read. She looks frustrated, maybe a little shaken, but also defiant. like she stands by everything she said, even though it clearly didn't go the way anyone expected. She starts to say something to the co-hosts, but her microphone is cutting in and out, and in the chaos you can't quite make out the words. Kevin is completely offset now, and the cameras lose sight of him. The audience doesn't know whether to clap or stay silent, so they do this weird scattered applause that fades out almost immediately. The whole studio feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for someone to tell them what happens next, but nobody seems to know. So there you have it, one of the most uncomfortable moments in recent talk show history, where a lighthearted interview turned into a full-blown confrontation that ended with Kevin Hart walking off set. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and drop a comment below answering this question. Do you think Jenna crossed the line, or was Kevin being too sensitive? Let me know what you think.